Discover the incredible journey of an amazing grandma as she transforms adversity into hidden dreams. Betty stood in the dim light of her attic on a damp afternoon, the drumming rain against the roof echoing her internal disarray. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through the one small window, revealing a world of forgotten memories waiting to be unearthed. She glanced around at the clutter, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Every item in this attic had a story, just like her. But here, among the tumult of old furniture and boxes, lay a forgotten part of herself, suffocating under the burden of family duties and lost the artist she had once aspired to be. Lifting the lid of a box marked Memories, Betty's heart raced as she pulled out brittle letters, the yellowed edges crumbling slightly in her frail hands. Each letter was a testament to dreams postponed, filled with glimmers of youthful ambition and the unapologetic hunger for expression. "You must follow your passion, Betty," one letter read, penned by a mentor whose voice echoed through the decades. "Life is too short to remain a spectator." She read and reread those lines, unease curling in her stomach as she wrestled with the gnawing doubts whispering in her mind. Memories flooded back, scenes of her young self, paintbrush in hand, lost in a world where colors spoke and dreams were vibrant. Yet here she was, a 68-year-old widow. Hadn't she sacrificed enough for her family? Her children's needs, her late husband's expectations, they were the threads weaving together her daily existence, binding her to a life of quiet conformity. Still, the flickering image of a brilliant canvas alive with color and emotion made her heart ache with longing. How could she possibly return to that world after so long? "It's too late," the words hung heavy in her mind, relentless echoes of the past, intertwined with the images of the life she had led. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Emma, her spirited granddaughter, always bubbling with creative fervor, discovered the letters a few moments later. "Grandma, this is incredible," she gushed, eyes alight with wonder. Yet, the fear behind Betty's smile revealed her yearning heart. "What if no one cares, Emma? What if it's just silly nostalgia?" Each word felt like a weight descending on her, a pressure she feared would suffocate her voice if she dared to unleash it. The two stood amidst the clutter, a younger spirit caught in the vibrant pool of aspiration, an older one entangled in the ropes of doubt. Together, they sifted through paintings past and futures waiting, laughter intermingling with the unspoken fears of judgment from their small-town community. In those moments, Betty felt the flicker of hope reignite from embers dampened by years of reluctance. But the impending call to showcase her art sent anxiety spiraling. What if she poured her heart into a canvas only to be dismissed by the voices that had grown louder over time, the skepticism that shadowed women like her, the doubt that had chased away her passion? The day drew closer, and with every stroke of courage, she found herself more bewildered. Soon, she would stand before critics who would judge both her art and her worth. Could she rise against those voices? As she looked at her canvases, each a fragment of her suppressed soul, the world outside faded, leaving her poised on the brink of a new chapter. Just as she prepared to reveal herself, the storm of unresolved tension surged within her. Would she allow despair to trap her forever, or could she embrace a truth hidden beneath the layers of hurt? The canvas awaited, holding the promise of rebirth, but first, she had to confront the abyss of doubt threatening to devour her spirit. Betty sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the modest mirror hanging on the wall. The faint image of a woman who looked older than her years stared back, the weariness etched deep in her features. Something shifted in her chest, a rebellious urge to defy the limitations she had allowed to bind her for so long. What if she replaced the doubt with action? The thought electrified her, awakening long-buried dreams, stirring a desire to reclaim her identity as an artist. She followed the impulse, feeling its momentum build as she ventured back into the attic. The rain outside had subsided, leaving behind a freshness that permeated the air. As Betty ascended the creaky stairs, determination sparked in her veins. The clutter would not intimidate her today, it would become her sanctuary. She dragged out the easel, setting it up in a corner lit by the filtered afternoon sun. With shaky but deliberate hands, she opened her box of paints, a vibrancy locked away for decades, and readied her palette. It was time to confront her fears. Her first brushstroke was a wobbly dab of cerulean blue. A mesmerizing wave flowed across the canvas, the color awakening something long dormant. As she continued, painting with wild splashes and strokes, she felt the burdens of doubt begin to lift. Each hue she applied ignited long-forgotten flames within her, rekindling joy that had been overshadowed by countless responsibilities. The canvas blossomed before her, a rebellious dance of color and emotion. Yet, the shadows of her insecurities loomed nearby, whispering the familiar refrain of "Who are you?" The question echoed as she turned her focus back to the canvas, her heart racing with vulnerability. "I am Betty," she murmured, a mantra rising from her soul. "I am the artist." It felt strange, this affirmation, bizarre in its simplicity yet profound in its impact. She mixed a deeper shade of red, pouring all the passion she had kept suppressed into the blend. The canvas was transforming, and so was she. In moments of clarity would slip from her grasp, replaced by memories of those who had doubted her, or worse, those who had remained silent. She questioned if others had perceived her as a mediocre dreamer rather than the vibrant artist she longed to embody. The gnawing voice persisted, but Betty was done being a prisoner of her own fears. Hours later, the attic reeked of paint fumes mixed with the dust of forgotten dreams. As she stepped back from her creation, the sight stole her breath, colors intertwined in a complex tapestry of her past and present. This day was more than a mere venture into her artistic desires, it was a rebellion against the life she had lived. It felt exhilarating, terrifying, and irreversibly liberating. Emma peeked into the attic, her eyes widening with delight at her grandmother's masterpiece. "Grandma, look at what you've done. This is stunning." The innocence of her granddaughter's reaction sent warmth flooding into Betty's heart. But as quickly as joy surfaced, doubts rushed back like a tide. What would it look like to lay bare her soul to others? Would her community perceive her work as authentic? Or would it only magnify her insecurities? The looming art showcase and the frigid whispers of judgment cast a pall over her burgeoning confidence. With a deep breath, she acknowledged the choice before her. She could retreat into the comfort of fear or step out into the light of vulnerability. As the brush hovered over the final touches, a realization crystallized: the journey had only just begun. Sensing a surge of adrenaline, she resolved to submit her work. The time had come to face the voices that threatened her spirit, and she was ready. However, the night felt heavy with anticipation and unresolved tension as Betty laid down her brush, her heart pounding with the realization that tomorrow would challenge everything she had discovered about herself. Would she seize this chance to reclaim her true identity? Or would fear once again steal her voice? Time would reveal the answer, but the dawn was gathering. And with it came the promise of a new beginning. The morning light streamed through the attic window, bathing Betty's canvas in a golden hue. It was an omen, both beautiful and unsettling, whispering promises of hope while stirring anxiety within her. The air felt electric, brimming with the tension of possibilities. Today was the day she would share her work, a leap into uncharted waters, surfacing both excitement and dread. Standing before her creation, she inhaled deeply, attempting to quell the turbulence roiling in her gut. Reflection echoed in her thoughts, the mantra of I am the artist fighting against the tide of self-doubt that threatened to drag her down. The doubts were insistent, like an incessant drip of water striking stone. Who would care about her work? Would her neighbors see a childish attempt rather than a legitimate expression? Betty shook her head, an act of defiance against the voices that loomed too close. This wasn't merely a hobby, it was an emergent aspect of her very identity. She had spent years neglecting this part of herself, hiding behind the role of being a caretaker and conforming to expectations that boxed her in. But now, confronted with the choice to hide or reveal, she felt the flames of conviction flickering back to life. With time slipping away, Betty gathered her supplies and headed toward the gallery where the showcase would take place. Each step felt heavier than the last, an anchor pulling her back toward the safety of her home and the familiar cocoon of comfort she had entangled herself within. But with every bead of sweat pooling beneath her collar, another push forward came from somewhere deep within. This wasn't just about the paint or the canvas, it was about reclaiming her voice, transforming insecurities into a call for authenticity. Arriving at the venue, the vibrancy of the art displayed around her made her heart race. Artists of all walks were showcasing their crafts, but amid the splendor, she felt acutely out of place. Nervous glances darted as she carried her piece across the room. She was hyper-aware of the scrutinizing eyes that might soon assess her import, questioning her credibility and skill. As she clumsily maneuvered her painting onto the display easel, she overheard snippets of conversation, critiques, praises, nervous exchanges. Each murmur resonated like a hammer, deepening the wall of anxiety her mind painstakingly constructed. Was she truly ready to be judged? With every second ticking down, her heartbeat crescendoed, and a sinking feeling took residence in her chest. She turned her focus inward, diving deep to confront the relentless wave of fear. What if they saw her as a failure? The thought clawed at her self-esteem. But then, as if defying gravity, a memory surfaced: the brilliance of color she had unleashed, and most importantly, the affirming words she had planted within herself. Betty took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders, forcing herself to stand a little taller. This was her moment, her declaration to the space around her. The vibrant strokes across her canvas were more than just pigment, they were her unfiltered emotions, the life she had lived, and the unrehearsed whispers of her soul. With the crowding souls buzzing around, she made a decision: she wouldn't just exist within this space, she would embrace it. A surge of courage coursed through her veins, igniting a purpose she hadn't realized she was searching for. As a small crowd began to gather, curiosity glinting in their eyes, she found her voice rising above the noise: this piece reflects my journey, my struggles, and my triumphs. But just as she began to elaborate, a familiar face caught her eye in the crowd. Charlie, an old acquaintance and critical voice from her past, stepped forward with a smirk. A chill swept down her spine as his presence amplified her uncertainty. Could she bear to stand under scrutiny from him? Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the weight of her resolve trembling under Charlie's watchful gaze. Would she crumble or rise to the occasion? The answer hung precariously in the balance, and as she opened her mouth to speak, the stakes had never felt higher. What awaited her in this confrontation with her past? Would she stand firm or falter when challenged by voices that had once drowned her spirit? The choices before her glimmered with significance, each one a potential turning point in her life. Betty's breath caught as she locked eyes with Charlie. Memories of past criticisms flooded her mind. His derisive comments about her ambitions stung like icy raindrops. They had been propelled by a facade of superiority, masking his own insecurities, but they had left scars on her self-esteem. Standing there, in that moment, the room faded into a blur, and the weight of expectation settled on her shoulders like a thick fog. "Not a bad attempt, Betty," he called, his words icy and calculated. The murmur of the crowd dimmed, the curiosity morphing into an audience for the impending spectacle. A knot twisted tighter in her stomach, but she felt an ember of defiance spark within. Her instinct was to retreat, to allow his words to curl around her like chains, but she clenched her fists, finding strength in the vulnerability of her position. The colors on her canvas vibrated with every nuance of her truth, and for every insult he delivered in the past, she recognized a silent reply simmering in her core. This was her creation, a testament to her strength. "Charlie," she began, her voice firmer than she felt, "I appreciate your feedback, but this piece is not for you to judge. It's a reflection of my journey." His brow furrowed, surprised by her resolve. The crowd leaned in, sensing the shift. Betty took a moment to reassess the space around her, noticing how every gaze was now anchored in her raw, palpable emotion rather than the riveted expressions of doubt and judgment. "I'm not an artist in the way you might think," she continued, allowing the words to pour from her, "but I am certainly creating. Each brushstroke here represents years of doubts, dreams, and everything I fought to reclaim. You don't see that because you only look for fault." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Betty felt a swift surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She was speaking not just to Charlie but to every scared version of herself that had ever whispered that she shouldn't try. This was her narrative, and she would shape it. Charlie's smirk faded, an uncomfortable silence enveloping him. His discomfort sparked a new confidence within her. She leaned into the vulnerability, recognizing it as a bridge to something more powerful. Art isn't about perfection, it's an invitation to feel. What I offer is a piece of my heart, and it's okay if you don't receive it. Those words hung in the air, creating a shift in the atmosphere. For the first time, she wasn't just addressing Charlie, she was reclaiming her right to be an artist, an individual. Emboldened, she gestured toward her painting. "These colors represent my struggles, and they don't have to meet anyone else's judgment. They are my truth." The crowd began to nod, the energy shifting from uneasy curiosity to genuine interest. Betty's heart raced, throbbing with an unexpected exhilaration. As the weight of the past momentarily lifted, she felt the first clear whispers of passion emerge, the kind that shattered the ice of doubt. A warmth surged within, redefining her space in this room, and for the first time, she felt as though she truly belonged. Just as she began to sense the room's transformation, someone at the edge of the audience raised a hand, their brow furrowed, uncertainty lined their face. It was a question teetering invisibly in the air, one that hinted at deeper reactions to her work. "But what if we can see it as you do?" The question echoed like a chime, slicing through her moment of triumph, inviting her to delve deeper into these complexities. As she grappled with the implications, the celebration of self felt as fragile as gossamer threads. An avalanche of possibilities surged within her, new defenses and vulnerabilities colliding in ways she had yet to comprehend. Betty's resolve flickered, her mind racing to articulate a response that would not only answer but evolve this moment. What lay beneath the surface of her courage? How could she continue to guide others toward understanding her perspective without losing her newfound voice? With her heart pounding in rhythm with the swell of uncertainty, she opened her mouth, bracing for an answer that could shape not only this moment but ignite her journey into the unknown. What revelation could she share that would elevate her truth further still? Strength. The response formed slowly in her mind, almost as if her thoughts were weaving themselves into something grander, something profound. Betty inhaled deeply, centering herself with a conscious effort that masked her trepidation. She recognized the weight of the question, the vulnerability laced within. This was not merely about her painting anymore, it was about bridging the chasm between self and perception. "What if you don't see it as I do?" she echoed, her voice steadier now. "Then let us explore that together." Art challenges us to step outside of ourselves, to embrace perspectives that may be foreign. If you can see my truth, I invite you to engage with it, ask questions, share your reactions. That is where real understanding is born. She felt the pulse of curiosity resonate in the room, a collective inhale. The intensity in the air shifted as she sensed that her vulnerability was being received not just as a weakness but as an invitation for dialogue. The prospect of engaging with her audience in this manner sparked a fire within her. It was no longer only about showcasing her work, it was about forging connections, establishing a narrative that intertwined her struggles with theirs. Charlie, visibly taken aback, shifted his weight. His eyes narrowed as if trying to pierce through a puzzle he couldn't solve. Betty noticed a glimmer of acknowledgement, a fragility in him she had never seen before. It intrigued her. Perhaps, beneath his armor of arrogance, there was a lesson to be learned. One by one, other audience members began to speak up, their questions dancing on the waves of uncertainty that had once threatened to drown her. Each inquiry unearthed hidden facets of her piece she had not fully articulated. One woman spoke about the vibrant reds in the painting, asking if it symbolized anger or passion. A man pondered on the muted tones, reflecting a struggle with acceptance, his voice soft but loaded with emotion. The answers came spilling forth from her like a river breaking through a dam. The red captures the fire that fueled my ambition, the struggle to channel that energy into something constructive. And the muted tones. They reflect the days when I felt invisible, overlooked, lost. These colors are a conversation between my past and how I've chosen to express my story. As she spoke, Betty realized she was illuminating her own experience in ways she hadn't expected. She was mining the depths of her journey, articulating not just art but identity. A friend, who had always stayed in the wings, remarked on how her piece articulated a complexity that many felt but could not voice. It was a revelation for her and for those listening. This moment became a crucible, molding her understanding of self in real time. She was not just a creator, she was a narrator, weaving connections between her truth and those who witnessed it. Every question ignited a deeper understanding, both within her work and herself. Each revelation nudged her toward evolving into someone bolder, someone more assertive in her place as an artist. Yet, despite the palpable shift around her, unease still whispered in her mind. Could she maintain this engagement with such authenticity? Would she be able to share the intricacies of her story without compromising her voice? As the dialogue progressed, her heart thudded in trepidation. Drawing from these encounters, Betty knew she was on the precipice of something transformative. The connection with her audience revealed cracks in her armor, both she and they were vulnerable yet soaring. But as the discussion deepened, a quiet tension began to form anew. A voice emerged from the back, one she hadn't expected, a subtle accusation, a question laced with doubt. And if the truth you're sharing is only your truth? It hung heavily in the air, waiting to be addressed. Betty felt the chill of the question wash over her. The internal conflict loomed like a shadow, prompting both fear and curiosity. What if, in the pursuit of authenticity, she had overlooked the perspectives of countless others? As she debated internally, absorbing the energy in the room, her eyes widened with a revelation. Perhaps the path to understanding lay not just in sharing her story but in seeking the stories of others. It would compel her to evolve, to embrace a more profound exploration of herself as an artist. Her heart raced as she contemplated how to respond, what profound pivot this could be in her journey. The moment beckoned her to rise once more, to confront not only the challenge ahead but also to delve into the true essence of art itself. How could she share her journey while inviting others to do the same? What would it take to create a tapestry of interconnected stories? As these questions surged, she steadied herself. The canvas of her life awaited further strokes, and she was ready to unleash her collaborative spirit. With determination pulling in her chest, Betty prepared to acknowledge the challenge laid before her. The next chapter of her evolution was on the horizon, fraught with uncertainty but ignited by the potential of collective storytelling. The invitation loomed, and it was time to extend her hand. Could she truly orchestrate a dialogue that transcended her own experience and embraced the collective story waiting to be shared? Betty inhaled sharply, feeling the weight of the question still hovering in the air. The voices of her audience faded into a dull murmur as she wrestled with the implications of that single accusation. It sent tremors through her confidence. Could she truly make her art inclusive without undermining her own narrative? Her mind raced. Yes, her truth was powerful, but might it also be narrow? She shut her eyes briefly, trying to crawl back into the vibrant colors of her canvas, but the reflections of their faces, laced with curiosity and skepticism, reproached her. She opened her eyes to Charlie, whose stance shifted from skepticism to something resembling sympathy. She wondered what he was thinking. If there was one thing she had learned through art, it was how to listen to the colors, the brushes, and now, the voices that settled into her chest like unanswered questions. She took a step forward, the floor creaking beneath her, accentuating the moment. I suppose the only way to address that query is not to defend my truth but to illuminate it, she pronounced, the gravity of her voice resonating with the crowd. Art has always been about individual experiences, but it can become a doorway to others' truths too. So let us confront that together. How can I, through my journey, shed light on your stories? A murmur of surprise rippled across the room, and Betty could see the flickers of hesitation in their expressions transform into intrigue. It was a shift in energy, a palpable collaboration forming in the atmosphere. The room fell silent, each individual processing the invitation to share. This is not just my canvas anymore, it can be ours, she continued, her tone gaining confidence with each word. Can art not be a mirror reflecting multiple lives? It can provoke dialogue, ignite understanding, and challenge the quiet acceptance of solitude in our individual experiences. The ripple of engagement strengthened, and she noticed hands rising, questions poised to fly. This exhilarating moment propelled her. Perhaps vulnerability was less about revealing her own story and more about unearthing commonalities woven through myriad lives. A man in the front row leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But how do you ensure that you're not silencing others in the process of sharing? How can you highlight those stories without drowning them out? Betty felt the heat of the challenge spark within her. This was not merely a question, it was an opportunity to craft dialogue, to navigate through uncharted waters where authenticity met humility. She smiled, her thoughts crystallizing. By asking. By reaching out to those stories and inviting them into conversations that matter. I want to create a concentration of truths instead of a monologue. The crowd erupted into soft, contemplative murmurs. Betty could feel the momentum building, like oil pouring into a curious machine. It was alive. Each individual was ready to reveal their own truths, their fears, and their experiences woven into her narrative. With renewed resolve, Betty envisioned her next steps. She realized that the artistry she sought to create extended beyond her stroke of the brush, it encompassed voicing her story while making space for others. Everyone had a canvas, it was time to bridge those gaps. Let us work on this together, she proposed. I invite each of you to share your experiences with me, whether alongside my art or in letters, whispered secrets, or discussions. We can compile them as a collective exhibition, one that transcends personal narrative to embrace the beautiful mosaic we all form. The room responded with an energizing hum of excitement. The concept of unity through shared experience ignited a fervor she had not anticipated. Betty's heart soared, but a shadow in the back of her mind stirred, whispering doubts. Was she truly equipped for this overwhelming endeavor? Could she orchestrate their stories without losing her own artistic identity in the process? The thrill of potential surged alongside her wavering confidence. She mentally catalogued the impeding work, the planning, the outreach necessary to weave together the intricate tapestry of shared voices. Questions loomed, more burdensome than before, but the prospect of enriching her own journey sparked fierce determination. Suddenly, Charlie stood, capturing her attention with an intensity that both intrigued and unsettled her. And what if the stories you collect lead you down a path you never intended to walk? He challenged, his eyes piercing through her resolve. What if some truths are best left unspoken? Her heartbeat quickened, the chill of that question clung fiercely to her skin. Perhaps the challenge was not merely external but something deep within. What if the very act of intertwining their narratives unleashed shadows she hadn't yet confronted? How could she ensure that her truth didn't collapse under the weight of theirs? I guess there's only one way to find out, Betty replied, her voice starting to tremble as her vulnerability returned. And I have to face those shadows, regardless. As she prepared for the whirlwind of revelations ahead, Betty knew she stood at a pivotal juncture. Each story shared would not only illuminate others but threaten to unearth her own buried depths. The answers awaited her just beyond the horizon, cloaked in uncertainty. With fierce determination, she whispered to herself, it's time to see what lies in those depths. Would she emerge transformed, or would the shadows consume her? The echo of Charlie's challenge lingered, a pulse against the backdrop of her thoughts. As the crowd slowly reclaimed its energy, the faces around Betty shifted from skepticism to eagerness, sparking a burgeoning curiosity about the stories they all carried. The power of her next steps loomed ahead, a daunting canvas waiting for vibrant strokes. Betty grasped the moment, driven by an urgent need for clarity. She needed to be meticulous in her approach. Each story collected held the potential to illuminate, yet also to disrupt. The doubt that had previously settled like a fog now became a sharp edge, guiding her instincts. She leapt into action. Visiting the individuals who had offered to share with her would be the first step. But as she returned to her studio later that day, the brush felt foreign in her hand. It was a sensation she hadn't expected, like trying to hold water with her bare fingers. Her palette lay untouched, colors melding together, forming a murky reflection of her turmoil. Why are you hesitating? She reprimanded herself. The studio had once been her sanctuary, now it felt more like a trap. The vibrant flashes of inspiration were gone, replaced by swirling doubts. She sat on her stool, head in her hands, balancing the weight of her aspirations with the uncertainty looming before her. Create a plan, she muttered, looking up at the blank canvas staring back at her, a reminder of the void she felt within. What stories mattered? Would experimenting with her narrative dilute her experience? She grabbed a piece of paper, determined to record her thoughts, her fears, and the seeds of ideas that began to bloom. Betty began by mapping out the steps that lay ahead. First, she would reach out to those who had expressed a willingness to share. Each voice would be approached with care. She would emphasize the importance of their contributions while setting boundaries that protected her own artistic integrity. It was an ongoing conversation, a dance between her story and theirs, and she would need to be skilled to navigate it gracefully. But then another thought crept in: what about her underlying message, the core of her artistic soul? Excitement danced alongside anxiety. She would need to reflect deeply on the essence of her vision to weave together a tapestry rather than stitching a patchwork blanket. The stories shared must amplify her truth without overshadowing it. The nights turned tense, sleep eluded her as she wrestled with ideas in the dark, mulling over the potential trajectories of their entwined narratives. Each day brought conversations that became a symphony of voices and emotions, amplifying the themes in her work. Within these dialogues, she felt a flicker of her artistic identity reigniting, though the shadows of doubt remained a persistent companion. It was during one of these meetings that Betty met Vanessa, an elderly woman whose life wove a rich history of heartache and resilience. As Vanessa shared her story, layers fell away. Each word was textured and real, speaking of her struggles and triumphs in a world that had often overlooked her. Betty's heart swelled with both admiration and responsibility. The depth of Vanessa's narrative held a mirror to her own hesitations, revealing how art could transcend personal experience and touch the collective thread of humanity. The encounter ignited a spark within Betty, the realization that her vulnerability could yield profound artistic evolution. But beyond that spark lay a smoldering question: how would she honor Vanessa's truth while remaining authentic to her own? The delicate balance of representation weighed heavily on her, raising the stakes in a way she hadn't anticipated. When they concluded their conversation, Betty felt energized yet conflicted. The stories were not merely words, they were lifelines connecting the past to the future. She jotted down every detail, her fingers dancing over the page, bursting with inspiration and the grammar of new ideas that begged to be birthed onto her canvas. But in the back of her mind lingered the chilling question posed by Charlie: what if the stories she embraced opened doors to shadows best left undisturbed? What if facing these shadows through her work exposed truths that could fracture her artistic identity? As the weight of her artistic choices pressed against her chest, she recognized it was time to step fully into the unknown, but with a firmness of purpose. Determined, Betty whispered softly, "I will not shy away." With the stage set for revelation, she understood that what lay ahead would demand everything of her, not just as an artist but as a vulnerable human being willing to face the light and dark of her journey. The canvas awaited, and just beyond the surface, a deeper connection was waiting to be forged. Would she dare to peel back the layers, even if it brought her face to face with all the fears and uncertainties dwelling beneath? With a steely resolve, she stood at the threshold of her next decision. The moment was beckoning. It was time to boldly confront those shadows she had once feared. Betty stood before the blank canvas, the urgency to act pulsating at her fingertips. She took a deep breath, drawing strength from the hushed quiet of her studio, that familiar sanctuary now filled with gravity. The atmosphere vibrated with the weight of her resolve and the stories that awaited her. No longer could she afford to sidestep the discomfort of grappling with raw emotions. If she was to honor those sharing their truths, she must first embrace the very shadows she feared. She began the next day, a clear plan etched in her mind: reach out to Vanessa for another conversation. There was something magnetic about Vanessa's narrative that cascaded in waves, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. Betty understood that authenticity would demand more than just paint and brush strokes. It required her to explore the elements of vulnerability within herself. She would be a conduit, not just an artist. That afternoon, she sat down with Vanessa once more, coffee steaming between them, an unspoken understanding shading the room. When Vanessa spoke, the words poured forth like a waterfall, details that left Betty spellbound. It was in the pauses, the soft crack in Vanessa's voice, that layers of resilience unfurled. Each word was rich with experience, embodying grief, joy, and an unwavering spirit that had traversed lifetimes. "Your story is powerful," Betty asserted as she listened intently, notebook in her lap. "But what do you want me to convey?" Vanessa looked at her, eyes glistening. "Just tell it like it is, dear. Shine the light on what is real, even when it feels dark." The urgency of her words struck deep within Betty. It was not just about painting a picture, it was about presenting truth stitched into the fabric of each canvas. By soulfully embodying the narrative Vanessa had woven, she began to see the contours of her own vulnerability rising like fresh paint to the surface. With every intention to honor Vanessa's story, she also resolved to explore her own. The shared fears of misrepresentation weighed heavily upon her, yet within the context of the dialogue, she began to find her path to reconciliation. Could she transform her trepidation into an empowering force? The question alone illuminated the room. Betty returned to her studio that evening, fired up by her renewed perspective. She sought the colors that had once felt lost to her, coaxing them to life with a fervor that surged through her veins. As the brush met the canvas, she allowed herself to truly feel the undertones of both Vanessa's experiences and her own. What emerged was a breathtaking collage, layers of narratives intertwining into a single powerful statement. It was not merely art, it felt almost celestial. Each stroke became a step in her journey through vulnerability and invitation for others to uncover similar paths buried in their essence. With every highlight and shadow, she struck at the discomfort that loomed over her ambitions, transforming it into a visual insight full of humanity. The studio began to hum with energy. Yet, just as the excitement filled her chest, a familiar twinge of doubt crept back in. Would this convergence of stories resonate? Would it feel genuine, or would it risk becoming a mere spectacle? She needed guidance. The next day, she reached out to her friend Sam, an open artist known for his candor on tough themes. As the hours drifted forward, anticipation danced in her chest. Would Sam's perspective help ground her spiraling thoughts? Could he ensure that the depth she sought to capture didn't dissolve in the complexity? As she prepared for that meeting, uncertainty washed over her. Facing Sam meant sharing not just her canvas, but the very essence of her endeavor, an act of proactive vulnerability. It was another step towards the light, but it also meant revisiting shadows she had yet to fully explore. The convergence awaited her, layers ready to be exposed, and with it the prospect of defeating the encroaching fear. Betty clenched her brush tighter, the moment of truth inching closer. Thoughts collided in a whirlwind of resolve and fear, mapping a future that felt exhilarating yet precarious. What revelations awaited her as she stood at the precipice of artistic exploration, preparing to confront the critiques that loomed ahead? The pivotal conversation with Sam beckoned. Would his insights fortify her artistic identity, or would they unravel the threads she was beginning to weave? Betty approached Sam's studio with a mix of trepidation and excitement, the sunlight filtering through the glass, casting fragmented shapes on the wooden floor. She inhaled deeply, allowing the scent of paint and turpentine to anchor her. This meeting felt less like a casual conversation and more like a surgical examination of her emotional landscape. She had to be ready for whatever truths would surface. "Hey, Bet." Sam greeted her with a warm smile, gesturing for her to enter. His eyes sparkled with a blend of mischief and insight, the kind of artist who thrived on introspection. "You look like you're about to unveil a masterpiece." "I hope so," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. As she settled into the cozy nook surrounded by canvases and brushes, she realized this was her moment to peel back the layers both of herself and of her current project. After exchanging pleasantries, Sam leaned forward, his gaze probing. "So, what is brewing in that creative mind of yours?" Betty's heart raced, every heartbeat echoing doubts along the walls of her mind. "I've been exploring vulnerability in a new series, inspired by a woman named Vanessa. Her story is profound, filled with shadows and light. I'm trying to capture it authentically, but I'm terrified of misrepresenting it. I want to honor her narrative." Sam nodded thoughtfully, resting his chin on steepled fingers. "That is a tall order. But tell me, why are you afraid of misrepresentation?" As she spoke, Betty began to unravel her fears. What if I'm not good enough? What if my style overshadows her reality? The last thing I want is for people to see my ego instead of the truth of her experiences. And whose truth is it? Sam challenged gently, eyes narrowing in thought. Are you not allowed to express your interpretation, your emotions tied to her story? The question hung in the air, striking a chord within her. As she pondered, her mind spun. This was the crux of her artistic journey. She had always shielded her true self behind her artwork, worried that vulnerability would render her fragile. I've been so consumed with being the perfect vessel for her narrative that I forgot about my own voice. Precisely, Sam replied, the hint of approval in his tone igniting her resolve. You need to weave your experiences with hers. What resonates with you? What speaks to your journey in her saga? Let your fears push you deeper into the canvas, not pull you away. His simple yet profound encouragement sent ripples through her. Each brushstroke could reflect both Vanessa's experiences and her own intertwined truths, transforming fear into a source of strength. Every self-doubt could become a vibrant color, lending richness and depth to her work. I never thought of it that way, she admitted, feeling empowered. It's about blending our narratives, the vulnerability of shared experiences. Exactly. And don't hold back. This is where your artistry can shine brightest, in the moments you fear the most, he urged, his enthusiasm infectious. With renewed vigor, Betty began expressing her thoughts, her voice growing steadier and bolder. They discussed techniques, themes, and how to approach difficult emotions without fear of reprisal. Each word exchange with Sam helped future-proof her resolve to untangle the conflicting threads of joy and sorrow she sensed within herself and Vanessa's narrative. As their conversation drew to a close, Betty felt a seismic shift. The settling dust of doubt began to clear, revealing a clearer path forward. I have to embrace this discomfort, she said resolutely. That has to be part of my artistry. Trust your intuition, Bet. The risk of exposure is always present, but so is the chance for profound connection, Sam encouraged, a smile breaking across his face. Leaving Sam's studio, she was struck by the enormity of the journey ahead. Could she truly merge her fears with Vanessa's story to craft something genuine? The creative dynamic she had just unearthed filled her with a frenetic energy, but as she walked home, a persistent question haunted her thoughts: what other hidden fears lay buried in her past, waiting to be confronted through the canvas? The one for honesty bubbled up once more, and she recognized that the deeper she dove into her art, the more personal shadows she would need to reckon with. How could she unravel those layers and still emerge intact? The next step loomed ahead, daunting yet exhilarating. Would she dare excavate the depths of her psyche and allow those revelations to drip into her work, revealing the true complexity of her spirit? Determination surged through her. She was ready to discover what lay beneath. Would she find the courage to face not just the canvas, but herself? With profound clarity, Betty stepped back into her studio, a surge of determination resonating through her bones. She had spent years leaning on the cocoon of familiarity, but now was the moment to dismantle it, to invoke the shadows that lingered everywhere in her past and reframe them into the artwork she so fiercely desired to create. Armed with the conversations she'd had with Vanessa and Sam, she understood that her artistic journey depended on more than simply depicting another's narrative. It was her duty as an artist to plunge into her own depths, melding her life with those she wished to represent. This endeavor would not only illustrate her experiences but unearth the raw truths that defined her identity. As she gathered her brushes, the once familiar strokes now felt bracingly fresh, colors swirled around the palette, beckoning her like old friends ready to reveal long-kept secrets. She remembered her reflection in the mirror and the promise she had made to reclaim her identity. Could she truly elevate her vulnerability into a powerful form of expression? How profound would it be to face her fears and balance them with her growing confidence? With a swift motion, Betty dipped her brush into a bold fuchsia and let it glide across the canvas. The hue was alive, vibrant, a pulse, a heartbeat echoing through the studio. Each stroke became a meditation. She infused it with every whisper of doubt she had carried, and every glimmer of hope she had dared to nurture. The fuchsia was layered with poignant strokes of sorrow, intermingled with sunlit hues of optimism. She let go, unleashing years of stifled creativity, channeling emotions she thought had long ago faded into silence. The door swung open with Alicia, her eldest daughter, stepping in, curiosity written across her face. "Wow, Mom. What are you working on?" "Something that is finally mine," Betty replied, a steady smile curling her lips, pride shimmering on the surface of her words. "It's an exploration, a journey through all the shadows I've kept hidden for too long. I'm blending my own narrative with what I've learned from others." Alicia stepped closer, her expression shifting from curiosity to astonishment as she absorbed the energetic splashes of color before her. "It's beautiful, Mom. You've really captured something here. What is it about?" "It's about hope, struggle, and connection," Betty answered as she continued to paint. Every stroke tells a story, and I think it's finally time to share my truth alongside theirs. Alicia nodded, a gleam of admiration in her eyes, and for a moment, Betty felt the weight of years lift off her shoulders. The approval of her daughter resonated deeply, illuminating the space within her being that had long been shadowed. As the canvas evolved, so too did her understanding of the relationship between her art and her identity. She continued to paint, each brushstroke significant, every color imbued with the emotional truths she had unearthed. No longer did the canvas represent a fight against fears, it transformed into a celebration of willingness, a space where vulnerability and strength coexisted. Days turned into weeks, and word began spreading about Betty's new work. The concept of vulnerability as strength resonated within her small-town community, drawing people together in conversation. Betty began to pull the threads of her connections, weaving a community tapestry, inviting others to share their stories alongside her own. Old acquaintances, neighbors, and even strangers engaged with her art, each voice adding depth and unity to her burgeoning expression. At the showcase where her work would finally surface, Betty began the preparations with an energy she had never known before. The opening night approached swiftly, buzzing with excitement and trepidation. Would she be met with curiosity, respect, or hesitation? Even as doubt danced on the fringes of her mind, it now stood in stark contrast to her confidence. On exhibit night, the gallery emerged as a vibrant arena of narratives entwined, her bold artwork, surrounded by stories that others had chosen to share, the unfiltered, visceral truths revealing the beauty of raw humanity. In the crowd, she recognized familiar faces. She was no longer a quiet observer of life but an essential part of a larger dialogue, where stories intersected and transformed into collective resonance. The canvas, adorned with colors of their shared journey, pulsed with harmonious energy. When called to speak, Betty took center stage, her voice steady and clear. Tonight, we celebrate not my journey alone, but the journeys interwoven with mine. Each of you adds a voice, a texture, and a story to this tapestry we are creating together. Claps erupted around her, and for the first time, she stepped fully into her identity as an artist, not just an individual telling a story, but a channel through which collective experiences flowed. Visibly moved, she witnessed understanding unfold in the faces around her, people interacting with the art and each other, sharing their own stories in turn, affirming their place in a narrative extended beyond the confines of solitary experience. As Betty stepped from the stage, hearts buoyed by shared connections, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The vibrant hues on her canvas reflected not just her growth but a broader spectrum of human experience. With every story told that night, she proved that vulnerability could bridge divides, solidifying her position not only as an artist but as a heartfelt connector within her community. Betty had conjured her long-buried dreams from shadows into glorious light, achieving the remarkable transformation she had sought for so long. This was a pivotal moment, a culmination of bravery over doubt, and the insistent echoes of "You are enough" rang true. Now standing tall, she had conquered both herself and the doubts that once claimed her identity. And as she began to leave the gallery, a burning conviction resonated within her. Every brushstroke was a promise to live authentically, and she was ready for whatever lay ahead. You need to subscribe now to the channel to catch the next thrilling emotional story. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this empowering conclusion. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and comment your thoughts on Betty's transformative journey.